Hey guys, welcome to my Yugo Deck profile. We've done the Xyz counterpart of Arc V, now for the Synchro user. Let's get into it. Starting with the monsters, we have Speedroid Double Yo-Yo. This is almost identical between anime and real world, the only difference being that the anime version is an if effect, while the real world version is a when effect. Any self-respecting Yu-Gi-Oh player knows how much of a difference that single change makes. Next is Speedroid Horse Stilts. The attack restriction really doesn't matter since this kind of effect will only be used for extra deck plays. Next is Speedroid Menko. This is better in the anime since it triggers on any attack, not just direct. Next is Speedroid Ohaja Kid. This is pretty specific since it only works against other Synchro users, and the summon restriction isn't great. Next is Speedroid Pachinko Cart. It's a decent bit of removal, and I'm guessing, due to my limited exposure to Arc V, that this was one of the ways Yugo purposely triggered Clearwing's effect. Next is Speedroid Razorang. It's not exactly a huge debuff, but every little bit helps, I guess. Next is Speedroid Rubber Band Plane. Combine this with Razorang, and that's a decent chunk taken off. Even if you don't use the attack drop, it's still a fairly free body for extra deck plays. Next is Speedroid Skull Marbles. If this can be paired with both something that makes it at least battle immune and forces attacks, your opponents would be forced to take some decent damage. Next is Speedroid Takatomborg. It's just the Phantom Knights of Silent Boots for Speedroids. Next is Speedroid Terratop. It's a shame it can't be normal summoned in the anime since that makes it potentially bricky. Next is the first tuner, Speedroid Den Den Daiko Duke. Being a comeback card is great, requiring dangerously low life points is not. Next is Speedroid Gumprize. It's certainly no Formula Synchron or anything, but if you can get a high attack or graveyard effect Speedroid monster with this effect, that's pretty good. Next is Speedroid Malicious Magnet. It's a bit better than Synchro material as it's faster and doesn't cost you your battle phase, but not being able to tune it with your own monsters is disappointing. Next is Speedroid Red-Eyed Dice. It's nice it's more generic in the anime, but it does require more setup to summon anything above level 7. The last monster is Speedroid Tri-Eyed Dice. It's a Necro Gardener that can also help with Synchro summons. Moving to the spells, we have High Speed Relevel. While this is clearly meant to help with Synchro summoning, there's little stopping you from Xyz summoning with it. Next is Shadow Stepper. Not the most conventional monster reborn, but useful for getting to Crystal Wing. Next is Shock Surprise, a simple 1-for-1 trade, but not quite as good as the real world version. Next is Speed Draw, very much a use on your first turn card, but not the worst draw too. Next is Speed Recovery. It's not a great monster reborn, but this was when normal summoning was becoming rarer. Next is Speedroid Scratch. Archetypal Rotas are never a bad thing. Ideally, you don't want them to have any kind of cost, but this one can get the graveyard-centric Speedroids going. The final spell is Synchro Cracker. If you can send a high-attack Synchro with this, that's a pretty devastating board wipe. Moving to the traps, we have Burning Sonic. It's alright protection. Not great, but usable. Next is Dice Roll Battle. Kinda funny how it has that name, yet does not have a dice roll effect, but being a sort of miracle fusion for Synchros is not an effect I've seen before. Next is Dicestadium of Fate. This would absolutely be a card Joey would play if it had been available in the Duel Monsters era. Next is Dragon's Bind. It's a pretty decent lockdown card, more so in the anime since it doesn't have a stat limit and doesn't blow up when the targeted dragon leaves the field. Next is Extra Shave Reborn. This is really specific, requiring you to have already made plays. Next is Following. It's pretty good battle protection. Even though your monster wouldn't get the boost from low-level attacks, they'll still survive. Next is Miracle Mirror. It's an odd bit of protection, but if you could get it off, great. Next is Redicecle. Urgent Tuning is just a lot better since it doesn't rely on luck, but this one can be activated outside the battle phase, so it does have that. Next is Speed Turn. It's a nifty little trick you can spring unexpectedly. Next is Speedroid Shuriken Hurricane. This card would be super deadly against Trickstars since their whole game plan is burn. The final card in Yugo's main deck is Urgent Tuning. Not the best way to quick synchro, but a good surprise since it can trigger during either battle phase. And that's it for what Yugo uses. Now for my additions. First is Speedroid Block and Roll. Tokens are great for synchro summoning, though the fact that the token won't have a built-in level is not so great. Next is Speedroid Car Turbo. The effects lock would be irrelevant for Yugo since his whole deck is wind, and it is a mostly free special summon and an attack boost. Next is Speedroid Fuki Madoji Piper. It's a good couple of effects, especially since getting out multiple wind monsters shouldn't be too difficult. The final main deck monster I added is Speedroid Ultra Hound, effectively an Armageddon Knight, and a decent, if slow, way to get the Speedroid Synchros out without requiring committing to the board. Moving to the spells, I added Speed Lift. It's not bad as long as you don't go crazy before using it. Next is Speedroid Wheel, another luck card, but still usable for getting synchro materials out quicker. Next is Pot of Greed, more draw power. Next card. The final spell is Tuner's High. Yugo's deck would be perfect for this card. Finishing with the traps, I added Speedroid's Duplicate. It's good removal, especially since it also targets back row. A shame the second effect is once per duel, but having a repeatable tuner trap monster would be a bit too good. Next is Descending Lost Star, a useful card for synchro decks, at least back in the day. Not so much now. The final card is Synchro Strike. If you can pack a lot of materials into a synchro, that is a hefty attack boost. Moving to the extra deck, we have Yugo's Ace Clear Wing Synchro Dragon. This would be bonkers in the real world if it didn't have once per turns with its effects, especially since the wiki says Yugo would intentionally trigger Clear Wing's effect himself. Next is Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. It's not too dissimilar between anime and real world aside from the synchro materials, and it's really just an upgraded Clear Wing. Next is High Speedroid Chambara. It doesn't get the biggest boost even with the real world version, but at least it's permanent. Next is High Speedroid Hagoita. It's an interesting effect that can be comboed with cards that let you synchro with your opponent's monsters. Next is High Speedroid Kandama. It's a good way to deal damage, especially if you can boost its attack. Finally is High Speedroid Puzzle. It's pretty specific with the attack boost, but this was during the era where special summoning was becoming the norm. Now for the cards I added. First is High Speedroid Clear Wing Rider. No idea how watered down this effect would have been in the anime, but I do like how the bike seems to be Yugo's dual runner combined with Clear Wing. Next is High Speedroid Cork Shooter. Back row searching wasn't exactly widespread in Arc V, though since I've only watched a few duels, I cannot confirm nor deny this, so I imagine it would only have the second effects, which would be great for synchro climbing. The final card overall is High Speedroid Kite Drake. You can either nuke the board or mass negate. No way this would be allowed in the anime. And that's it for the deck. I do like doing these character decks, even though it's extremely rare to have a full deck to work with. Hope you guys liked this one. As always, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on X, consider backing me on Patreon, and remember to stay chilled.